As the curtain comes down on the first World Cup on the African continent, the world applauds a successful tournament. But how will it benefit South Africa in the weeks, months and years to come? Will the poor reap any dividends? Will this nation of many parts become more united? What is the legacy of South Africa 2010? This is Inside Story. Hello, welcome to the programme. I'm Nick Clark. So, World Cup 2010 comes to an end. Many had questioned South Africa's ability to host and fund the Games. Some were concerned that fans would be deterred by high travel costs and South Africa's infamous crime rates. FIFA has said that the ticket sales didn't go quite as well as they'd hoped, but now it's being hailed a success by many around the world, including the likes of FIFA President Sepp Blatter and the South African President Jacob Zuma.
We are very excited about the way the soccer tournament has proceeded here in South Africa. All the 32 teams that have played in this tournament are winners. And all of the millions that have watched the competition from the comfort of their homes, from stadiums or fan parks, are also winners. It has been a tournament of champions.
Well, joining me to discuss the topic in London, David Owen, chief columnist for the Inside World Football website. In Johannesburg, Rich Makondo, chief communications officer for the 2010 FIFA World Cup. And also in Johannesburg, we have Diapolo Pecco, a policy analyst at the Trade Collective. Welcome to you all. Good to see you here joining us on this programme. May I ask all of you, first of all, purely as a sporting event, we all agree it was successful. David Owen, first of all.
Yes, I think it was successful. I think what it's done, so far as I can judge, is to provide a boost, refreshment, if you like, of South Africa's global image. And I think that's by far and away the most important thing one can hope for when hosting these mega events.
Rich Makondo, so ultimately brand South Africa has prospered.
Indeed, it has branded South Africa, but not only that, there have been, I think branding is just one of those 5 things that we wanted to achieve. The first one was the infrastructural development, which has been achieved. You can see we've got brand new stadiums, including this one behind me, and we've got brand new roads, and we've got brand new airports. We've got more than 40 new hotels around the country, and also the second one was to provide employment. This World Cup has actually boosted the economy of the country at the time when everyone else's economy is faltering. 415,000 jobs have been created. Of course, 20,000 of those are going to go away because that's where the infrastructure was involved in. And tourism also. Between the 1st of June and the 1st of July, we had 1 million visitors in our country. Okay. We don't have figures yet from the 1st of July up to date, but I'm sure it's going to be more. And of course, branding was the last one. But the last one was the 4th one. But the last one is the social cohesion that it has brought to our country.
Okay, we'll get on to that.
Stadium,
we'll get on to that just in a second, if you don't mind. I just want to bring in Diapolo Pecco. We'll discuss all those issues that you've been talking about just in a moment or two. But Diapolo Pecco, fair to say that many doubted South Africa's ability to host this World Cup, but they've done so with bells on, haven't they?
With whistles and bells, actually. It's been, in terms of a sporting event, it's been excellent. In terms of the logistical planning, the management of it, it's been amazing. The atmosphere, I think just about everybody that we've spoken to here in Joburg, locally, and also our international visitors have agreed that it's really been a sterling event. A lot of surprises, really good football as well. Lest we forget it was about the sports, among many other things. The vuvuzelas, the whole occasion of it, a real festival, carnival atmosphere for the past month or so. Of course, a few other concerns which we'll go into in terms of the actual economic and the lasting benefits. But of course, I agree that in terms of a brand South Africa, it's played a huge role and quite a positive role in that regard.
Okay, well, of course, huge, colossal sums of money, in fact, involved in all of this, all the while Of course, people still struggling to go to school, hand-to-mouth existence and so on. The final price tag for hosting the World Cup is expected to be released in September. Now, according to FIFA's 2010 organising committee, the number could easily be over $5 billion. About $4 billion was spent on infrastructure projects, and that includes the $1.5 billion spent on football stadiums. South Africa now left with 10 stadiums, some say too large for domestic demand, and in essence possibly a financial burden when you consider maintenance and so forth. However, the organisers say the event created over 115,000 jobs for the poor, and more than that, as we were just hearing from Rich Makondo. In total, it's reckoned the country could benefit to the tune of $12 billion from future investments, tourism alone accounting for $1.3 billion. But all these are figures, slightly subjective. But Rich Makondo, a good World Cup, yes, but this chasm still exists, doesn't it, between South Africa's, the sparkling hotels and stadiums and the sprawling, poverty-ridden townships?
Well, what is funny about that is that I think people forget that there's no one major event that can kill the social ills of a country. It has never happened. It has never happened anywhere in the world. What I can say to those who are actually skeptical about whether it's money well spent, the question that I may ask is, the government of this country has got plans for each of those aspects. If you go to those areas where you say that people are hungry, people are don't have any jobs, you ask them exactly whether they've enjoyed watching the World Cup, they will tell you they did. And if you ask them exactly whether they would want to see another World Cup coming, they would gladly tell you that of course they would be. But of course people would say, I don't have anything, I don't have a job and so on. But the issue is that the World Cup has never been a project where it's going to cure all the problems of the country.
Well, I guess the point is that we're asking the question whether or not it's possible to take up the momentum that's been enabled by the World Cup and to change things. And dear Paulo Pecco, do you think it's possible that that may happen?
I'm not sure. I think that, as you've alluded to, the costs of this whole event have been massive. An estimated 800 billion rands, which is just over $100 billion US, have been spent in infrastructure and in stadia. And exactly as you've mentioned, we're not sure whether there's enough demand for these stadia to be used domestically. I mean, just a few statistics that only 7% of schools in this country have well-equipped libraries, school libraries. And for every 7 seats that the stadia cost, we could have actually put in a school library. So I think when one looks at those sorts of the kind of cost-benefit analysis, in tourism is important, yes, but I mean tourism is no way to build a lasting legacy, a lasting economic legacy. No country that has hosted a large event before has ever seen tangible and lasting economic benefits. Not Greece after the Olympics, not Germany after their World Cup, not Japan and Korea after their World Cup in 2002.
Can I just jump in there, Leopoldo? Forgive me for interrupting, but I just want to jump in. So are you saying that the World Cup shouldn't have happened, or that we've got to be very careful now how any profit and, as I say, momentum is spent and is put to the future?
Look, I think that in terms of other very glaring expenditure priorities, such as a huge housing deficit, such as a healthcare system that is in crisis, such as a public education system which is in crisis, and a lot of striking workers, for example. It's an expenditure which I'm not saying it shouldn't have happened, but I think certainly when one looks at the kind of expenditure and other priorities, social development priorities we may have, that we may live to rue and say, well, what did it actually gain us ultimately? And I think that's what Greece is asking itself now. And even the kind of growth which we have seen in many other countries, we cannot necessarily link it to the events that they ran. The jobs which have been created are very temporal jobs. They're very transient. They are not jobs, the services sector is the largest growing sector. Construction, you build a stadium for 6 months to a year and then you're unemployed again. Same with roads. These are very transient jobs, and I think we need to be a bit we need to be very careful when we throw those kind of figures around, because there's a context. Those are very temporary jobs.
Okay, let's bring in David Owen. Sir, what's your view? How much do you think this World Cup embraced the poor, and how much will they benefit now it's over?
Well, I think that's the big question. The problem with making any of these comparisons is that you never know what the situation would have been had the event not taken place. So they're always imaginary, and they always depend to some extent on the starting point of the person making the comparison. What I do think South Africa has an opportunity to do now, having changed the perception of a very large number of people overseas about the country in a very positive manner, is to try to attract foreign investment. I think it's something that the country, since Mandela was released, it's never really been able to attract foreign investment in sufficiently large amount to really help the economy of the country take off sufficiently to make inroads in all these problems we've been hearing about.
And do you think what's happened in the last... Right, okay, that's exactly what I was just going to say. Do you think what's happened in the last 4 weeks will enable that to happen?
Well, I think it's got an opportunity, but I don't think it'll happen if people now just switch off and say, OK, job done, the World Cup's over, we've done it very well. In a sense, it's just the beginning. I think people are now sitting up and taking notice of South Africa in a way they probably weren't a month or two ago. And it's a very important time now for the country to try and capitalise on that.
So, Rich Makondo, important time for the country to capitalise. And as we're hearing, that mainly comes down to outside investment. But tell me, why should people think they should come and invest in South Africa just because the country's had a good World Cup?
It's not only that. People should come and invest in the country because the country has got infrastructure and facilities for them to be able to conduct their business, and this country offers exactly that. 2 weeks ago, I and the Chief Executive Officer of the World Cup, Denny Jordan, were in Cape Town, where we were talking to investors. They were very actually complimentary of the facilities which the country has. And there's no doubt that you look at all other aspects of your money when you invest, rather than just say that this country has actually hosted the World Cup. What we are saying is that when people come here, they will be able to see for themselves what we have. The decision that they make, that we also provide with those facilities and opportunities, will be actually influenced better by being here. Some of them have actually never been here before, but they got an opportunity. Someone who's watching the World Cup in the 280 countries or 290 countries where the World Cup is being shown is going to say, well, I've never been to that country, maybe let me investigate. That's what we are actually talking about. We are saying that someone needs to come out with a better figure. Whoever is criticizing this event must say, for the money that was spent for this event, these are the things that this event, the money would have actually solved. Housing, education, hospitals, and so on. But no one has. But those departments of housing,
you have to question why, you know, what's the point?
So
you have to question what's the point of spending 1.2 billion on stadiums when perhaps, say, in Pretoria, 2,000 homeless have to go and watch the game in a rundown church.
Because there is a budget for building those stadiums. It is not correct to say that that money was spent because of the World Cup. This money was spent as an accelerated by the hosting of the World Cup. These stadiums were supposed to be renovated anyway. Other stadiums were supposed to be built anyway. I was just going to give you an example. I'm saying to you, on the 21st of August, the Super 14 game between Australia and South Africa is going to be played at this stadium. This has never happened before, and these stadiums will be full. Rugby has never used a stadium used by soccer in the past. This is going to happen. Now, I don't know why we actually go on and talk about the fact that is the stadium like this one money well spent. These stadiums have got management companies which are going to make sure that they are sustainable. And I can give you an example. The management company of this stadium says it needs 25 events a year to break even. And this stadium is already booked for 30 events.
Okay.
So I don't know why we would like to criticize without putting
Fair enough.
on
Well,
the table.
let me put that to Diapolo-Peko. What are your views about what he said?
I mean, I think that if in terms of a response, 10 years of housing could have been built with the same money. And I think it's fine that the budget was there already. And it isn't that there's a lack of budget. It's just that in relation to the fact that there's a huge housing deficit, that there are people who have been waiting for RDP housing for 15 years or so, and yet stadiums seem to have emerged like as quickly as mushrooms. I think that it's an issue of prioritization. I also think that the whole notion of investment, attracting investment to this country, South Africa has always been a very, very desirable investment capital, especially in Africa, and we didn't necessarily need the World Cup to do that for us. We had already done it. Perhaps it has just put it even more prominently on the map. The notion with investment is also whether it's a kind of investment which leads to social development, the distribution. South Africa remains one of the most unequal, it's the most unequal society in the world. It was unequal 4 weeks ago, it remains unequal today. And I think it's slightly disturbing I don't think we can have a kind of a well, let them eat cake attitude towards the very many dispossessed. If I can give an example, the Gautrain, which cost many, many billions of rands and was supposed to take us from the airport to Sandton and stuff, and hopefully bring the city closer together. The Rea Vaya, the rapid bus system, there's been a very low take-up of either of those facilities. It's because of cost, it's also because of the way that the taxi companies are managed, etc. And that instead of bringing us closer together, in many respects, this has actually sharpened our contradictions. Also the way that the cities were cleaned up in anticipation of the World Cup, and a lot of homeless people were displaced, the urban displaced were put in rather remote camps. This is all well documented, out of sight of our World Cup visitors. And I think that these are some of the things that we need to be very aware of. Small business people, small traders, street hawkers, who got absolutely no benefits from any of this. So going forward, we need to, if we're going to capitalize on it, then this needs to be part of an integrated springboard to a process of bringing people closer together economically and prioritizing
so you're talking there about
development issues.
Right, you're talking there about bringing people closer together, and one of the phrases that we were hearing earlier was this from Rich Makondo, was this phrase social cohesion. David Owen, do you think, and to what degree, I should say, to what degree do you think that social cohesion has been improved by this year's World Cup, in the sense that the many and varied people of South Africa are more united now than they were 4 weeks ago?
Well, I mean, I'm an outsider, so it's probably harder for me to judge. But I think in the short term, there was a greater feeling of cohesiveness the 3 weeks I was there than I've known in the past. I think it's much more important that this can be sustained, and it's something that's very difficult to do. I think it will be very difficult for people to answer questions such as maybe somebody who doesn't have a job, who's sitting there saying, well, they can build Soccer City like this, they can build this amazing stadium, why can't they find me a job? I think those questions are not easy to answer and can't be ignored either. So I think whether in the long run this cohesiveness can take root depends largely on whether questions like that can be positively answered.
Okay, so Rich Makondo, do you think this cohesiveness in the long run will take root?
It has actually begun to take root. You just need to be in Johannesburg or any city in Johannesburg and see how people are proud of their own country. You just have to be at the stadium and see the people who have never been to the stadium are painted in the colors of the South African flag, black and white, and you just have to go to Soweto and see black and white people together enjoying a pint of beer. And I have attended matches both in Soweto, where the mostly all white rugby team was playing for the first time. And as I'm saying, the Springbok rugby team will be playing at this stadium. It will be for the first time. So I think we, as the organizers of the World Cup, have created a spark and a foundation for South Africa to begin to live together for the sake of social cohesion, but also to make sure that there's some kind of nation building with each other. I agree with my colleagues there to say that sometimes it's a question of prioritization, but we believe that this World Cup has served as a spark to many better things to come, job creation and so on. But if you were to ask me whether that money that was used should have been used to build schools or houses, I would say the government of the day and the organizers have priorities, and they have priorities, and they've chosen the World Cup as one major spark to make sure that everything else happens.
All right, Diapolo Peko, I suppose there's one thing that we cannot quantify, and that's the degree of pride that this whole World Cup has generated for South Africans as a whole.
Yeah, absolutely it has. I mean, I think that even people like me who have, are very ambivalent about the cost of it. We were there, we were waving our flags. It was a wonderful moment, wonderful occasions, and backing all the African teams, as well as admiring the skill that all the international players also brought to the shores. But I think that while we're speaking of social cohesion, in that kind of national pride, we mustn't forget that there are already rumors, and more than rumors, threats that there might be renewed so-called xenophobic attacks in the midst of all of this euphoria. And I think that it's important not to mistake euphoria and excitement that comes with that euphoria with social progress. And that in the same way that our national pride and the euphoria that comes with it cannot be quantified, it certainly doesn't mean that some of the more ugly attitudes that that we saw erupting in 2008, exactly 2 years ago, have in any way subsided. And we've heard some horrible things that people are saying, as soon as this World Cup is over, go back with your teams, and that's referring to other African citizens who live in this country. So I think in the midst of our excitement, our joyfulness, and our sense of collective achievement, let's not forget that this was an African event. It happened on a South African soil, and let's be mindful that there's a very sinister and a very ugly underlying belly that we need to be aware of, that we never really got rid of 2 years ago, and that it goes to show that where there's scarcity, you will get the attitude of, they come to take our houses, we've had a World Cup, but what about me? And there's a lot of what about me.
Just one more question to David Owen. We're just about to run out of time, so 30 seconds if you could. No doubt history will put this World Cup down as a great success, but briefly, your view, will it be a turning point for South Africa?
I hope so. I think we'll just have to come back in a couple of years' time and see. I think in terms of staging sports events, it may be a stepping stone to hosting something like the Olympic Games, which is a way in which maybe these great stadia that they've built can be put to long-term use. All
right, that's excellent. Good to have all your views on what was ultimately a great World Cup. We'll watch with interest to see how much of a turning point it may be for South Africa. In London, David Owen. In Johannesburg, Rich Makondo. And also in Johannesburg, Diapolo Peko. Many thanks. And thanks for joining us here on this edition of Inside Story. Any thoughts or issues, just drop us a line, insidestory@aljazeera.net. From me, Nick Clark, it's goodbye.